When one person goes missing, it is heartbreaking enough. But when multiple people go missing at the same time, in unexplained circumstances, it is devastating for the collective families left behind. In this week's video, we'll be looking at 5 mass disappearances that are no nearer to being solved than the day they happened, leaving their loved ones in a never-ending limbo of not knowing. Be warned, these cases are disturbing. Now, before we begin, in all the years we've been creating content for you here at Top 5s, we've told thousands of different stories across countless genres, while referencing hundreds of historical events and other educational subjects. A lot of you have asked how we are able to keep up with such demanding research, or how we continue to find inspiration when it seems like we've crossed every path imaginable. While it can often be hard to find the time and energy to absorb the infinite amount of information needed to make our videos the highest of quality, we've turned to Blinkist, the perfect solution to boost our productivity without missing out on those mind-bending stories we're known for. This video is sponsored by Blinkist, an application meant for those who want to feed their mind but might not have all the time in the world. Blinkist hosts a library full of thousands of non-fiction books and offers 15-minute highlights that you can read or listen to podcast style, instead of trying to cram the entire volume. You simply pick the topic you're interested in, scroll through the library's options, and choose whatever title piques your interest. In just a matter of minutes, you can find the knowledge that might have cost you hours, expanding your horizons with just a few swipes. Subjects range from science, nature, and the environment to economics, society, and culture. Here at Top 5's HQ, we've found their history titles the most enlightening lately, exploring books such as Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari and Napoleon the Great by Andrew Roberts for our videos on humankind and their infamous leaders. You can help support the channel whilst joining us in our own personal search for wisdom by signing up for Blinkist using our specialized link below. The first 100 people to click on the link are going to get unlimited access for 1 week to try it out. You'll also get 25% off if you want the full membership. This 7-day trial is completely free, and you can cancel at any point during that time. This is really an opportunity you do not want to miss. There are stories out there to be told, so go and discover them without the stress, but with all the ease of Blinkist. And now, let's get into this video. The mysterious disappearance of the Anjakuni people. During the harsh Canadian winter of 1930, fur trapper Joe LaBelle searched for shelter from falling snow and bitter cold. He was close to Lake Anjakuni in the Northwestern Territory and knew there was an Inuit settlement in the area. As he stumbled into the village, he noticed how eerily silent it was. On previous visits, Joe had been greeted by a warm and bustling community. He carried on, hoping to find lodging, but soon realized the place was completely deserted. Joe found abandoned huts, smoldering fires, meals left out uneaten, and personal possessions and weapons left intact. As he continued to search, it became clear that the people of Lake Anjakuni had vanished. Something had happened that forced the entire community to abandon their homes. Just as disturbing was that every single dog in the village appeared to have starved to death. Suspecting something terrible had happened, and knowing the Inuit community would never leave behind valuable commodities for no reason, Joe hiked a few miles to the nearest telegraph station to alert the authorities. Hours later, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police arrived. As they travelled to the village, they were joined by trapper Armand Laurent and his 2 sons, who gave a curious account of what they had seen a few days earlier. They claimed that they had witnessed an airborne object heading in the direction of Lake Anjakuni that appeared to change shape as it moved. If that wasn't strange enough, when the Mounties searched the village and saw for themselves what Joe had described, they made another extraordinary discovery. In the graveyard, every grave had been opened and emptied, with the headstones neatly stacked on the side of the plots. How could a community of around 30 men, women and children disappear without a trace, taking their dead with them? The Mounties immediately ordered a search party for the missing villagers, but failed to find anything. They did, however, discover a tied-up pack of dogs on the outskirts of the village that had died of starvation before being covered by snow. They also stated they witnessed strange pulsing lights in the sky above Lake Anjakuni. Although it's worth pointing out, these could have been the Northern Lights, although the officers claimed they were not like the natural phenomena that they were used to seeing. After a long and arduous investigation, the RCMP officers used berries found nearby to determine that the villagers had been gone for almost 2 months. However, it was apparent from the smouldering fires and prepared food that someone else had been using the village after they fled. The RCMP eventually concluded the disappearance was a seasonal or permanent abandonment, given the nomadic nature of the Inuit people. However, they did note it was odd for them to leave behind their weapons and provisions. As for the lights and craft witnessed, well, they were never explained. For many, this left a lot of unanswered questions, and several did not believe this explanation, which has left the case wide open to speculation. The most popular theory is that the Inuits were the victims of a mass alien abduction, and the strange aircraft and lights back this up. Others believe some malevolent spirit was responsible, possibly a Wendigo, the evil spirit said to inhabit the forests and Great Lake regions of Canada and America. The Wendigo is known to invoke feelings of insatiable hunger and the desire to cannibalize other humans, in those that fall under its influence. Others believe the Inuit sky god, Tonga Rasuk, was responsible. Another popular theory is that the members of the village were somehow pulled into another dimension. However, like many mysteries, the truth about what really happened at Lake Anjakuni has become distorted with the passage of time, and fact has given way to fiction. Yet we think you'll agree the story remains an odd one with no real conclusion, either rational or supernatural. Whatever the truth, the mysterious disappearance of the Anjakuni people remains one of Canada's most enduring mysteries, one that continues to trouble the vast northern wilderness to this day. The Gill family disappearance. When an entire family of 6 disappears, you would think that the whole world would know about it. However, in the case of the Gill family, there appears to be little information outside of Argentina, the place where it happened. The Gill family lived on the La Candelaria Estancia, where Menko Gill worked as a ranch hand and his wife Margarita worked at the local school. The estancia or ranch was around 500 hectares and was located in a town close to the city of Parana, the land belonging to Alfonso Goetti, who was also Menko's boss. On January 13, 2002, the family travelled the 30 kilometers to Valer to attend the wake of their friend Maximo Vega. This was the last time anyone saw the family. 56-year-old Menko, his 26-year-old wife, Margarita, and their collective children, Maria 12, Osvaldo 9, Sofia 6, and Carlos 2, disappeared off the face of the earth. In mid-March of that year, Mencho's brother Otto tried to contact the family but got no response. Then his sister Luisa travelled to her brother's home, but again got no response. Then in June, Alfonso Goetti showed up at Luisa's house asking where the family were, saying he was concerned they had not returned from a 3-month vacation. He even suggested that they could be staying in relatives in Santa Fe, or that perhaps they had travelled to look for another job in the north. Luisa was suspicious of this explanation, as previously Goetti had only ever given them a maximum of 10 days leave, and after checking with friends and neighbours, none of them were aware they had planned a trip, and it seemed unlikely, as neither of them had a car. It was also revealed that Margarita had not picked up her latest salary. Luisa reported the disappearance to the police. However, initially they leaned towards the hypothesis that the family had indeed gone on vacation, and perhaps found another job and not returned. Another relevant fact is that the family cell phone of the telephone company CTI continued to be active until April 2003, 15 months after the disappearance. It took until July 2003, 18 months after their disappearance, for police to investigate and search the area, but they found nothing. In the years that followed, investigators interviewed several people, searched various areas, and handed out missing person flyers, but nothing was found. In 2008, the fields in the area were excavated, wells were dug out, and in the family home the floor was raised. Traces of blood were found using luminol. However, the samples did not show the Gill's genetic pattern, although experts made it clear that over time the samples had been contaminated. Nothing much happened for the next 8 years, until on June 16, 2016, Alfonso died in a traffic accident. Alfonso's death produced an unexpected twist in the case. Armando Nani, a rural contractor who carried out planting work in the Goethe field, and who knew Menko Gill, came forward. Nani hadn't wanted to speak before, out of fear of Goethe. But with Goethe dead, he made an extraordinary claim. He said that the Gills did not go on a trip to find work elsewhere. They were in fact buried in the area. He claimed that 20 days before the family disappeared, Menko Gill dug 2 wells, one in the bed of a stream that at the time was dry. Armed with this new information, on October 2017, investigators began excavating the 2 wells. However, just 2 weeks later, they had abandoned the dig. The first well did contain bones, but they belonged to animal remains. The second well, that was now filled with water, posed a significant and costly problem, and the additional funding needed to be approved by the judicial branch. Subsequently, the excavation stopped, and the field was planted with soy and returned to its normal purpose. The last thing that was known is a report produced by firefighters that surveyed the watercourse and provided a fact. The land had been removed previously, which would indicate previous disturbances or digging. And that is where the investigation is today. Nearly 20 years after an entire family disappeared, their fate still remains unknown, and the mystery rolls on. For the family, this must be agonizing, knowing that in all likelihood their loved ones are buried in the field in which they worked and lived. Will the mystery ever be solved? Will they ever get justice and a decent burial? Or will money, or lack of it, prevent all of that? What's your thoughts and theories on this one? Disappearances of Paul and Sarah Skibber and Lorenzo Chivers. 9-year-old Sarah Ariel Skibber lived with her mother Michelle Russell in Granbury, Colorado. Michelle and Sarah's father Paul were divorced, and on the weekend of February 5th, 1999, it was Paul's scheduled visitation with his daughter at his home in Thornton, Colorado. Michelle and Paul shared custody of Sarah, and she spent every other weekend with her father and every Wednesday. Paul was devoted to Sarah, and he did everything he could for her. Paul lived with his mother Sharon and on-off girlfriend Teresa Donovan, who had recently given birth to a baby boy, although Sharon was out of town on this particular weekend. Although the arrangement wasn't always harmonious because Sharon and Teresa didn't get along, it later transpired that Paul had told his mother he was unsure whether the baby was his and was planning to have a paternity test. He was also going to ask Teresa to move out. Paul owned Tough Movers, a company based in Westminster, Colorado. He had built the company from scratch, and on Sunday, February 7th, Sarah had accompanied her father on a moving job in Morrison, Colorado. They were helped by one of Paul's employees, Lorenzo Chivers. The trio were last seen at approximately 6 p.m. that day, carrying out the moving job. This was the last time anyone seen or heard of them. The alarm was first raised by Teresa. She called Paul's mother Sharon on the Monday morning and told her that Paul had not arrived home the night before. He hadn't taken Sarah back to her mother's house either, and he hadn't shown up at work, even though he had a job lined up that morning. Lorenzo Chivers, who lived with Teresa's sister, was also missing. Teresa had phoned the police department, but stated they did not take her seriously. Sometime later, Sarah's mother Michelle also phoned the police, notifying them that Sarah had not been returned from her weekend stay with Paul. Investigators initially believed that Paul had abducted Sarah with Chivers' assistance, and a warrant was issued for Paul's arrest, and authorities thought the disappearances were related to a possible custody dispute. Investigators later discovered one of Paul's vehicles. which had been abandoned in the Westminster parking lot, used by his company, and it wasn't parked the way he normally positioned it. The truck had been pierced by 2 bullets and was smeared with blood. A piece of human skull with hair attached was inside, and there was additional hair on the truck's fender. Shell casings and blood were found in the parking lot as well. There was no sign of Sarah, Paul or Shivers at the scene. Shivers' car was also found parked in the lot, but Paul's other vehicle was located in Denver, Colorado. DNA tests proved that the blood on the truck's door was Paul's. The blood on the ground outside was Paul's and Sarah's. The piece of scalp was from Paul, and the hair was Sarah's. Authorities changed the classification of the missing persons case at that time to endangered missing and announced that foul play was suspected in the disappearances. They believed Shivers, Paul and Sarah were ambushed and killed when they returned the truck to the lot, and that Paul was the probable target, and his daughter and Shivers were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. To date, no one has been charged with any involvement in any of the disappearances. The remains have never been found, and for the families, the mystery of what happened to their loved ones continues. The case is still very much open, and if anyone has any information, please call Westminster Police Department on the following number. Nina. In 2013, the 85-year-old 50-foot ocean racing schooner known as Nina disappeared without a trace on the stormy Tasman Sea, along with its American owner, David A. Deitch III, his wife and 17-year-old son, and 4 crew members. Nina was a celebrated, well-maintained vessel that in 1928 was the first American yacht to win the Fastnet race after a 600-mile sprint through the stormy English Channel and Irish Sea. David was a commercial mariner and diver with an extensive maritime background and an experienced skipper, more than capable of sailing Nina under adverse conditions. He also kept Nina in excellent working order, and she was equipped with a manually activated EPIRB, a spot beacon, a satellite phone, parachute flares, and a VHF radio. Nina left Opua in the Bay of Islands on New Zealand's North Island on May 29, 2013, bound for Newcastle, Australia, a 1,500-mile trip expected to take 8 to 10 days. Things appeared to be going to plan until June 4th when contact was lost. The last contact was at around 11:50 p.m. on June 3rd when Bob McDavitt, a New Zealand meteorologist, received a satellite phone call from Nina crew member Evie Nemeth, who said the weather had turned nasty and asked where Nina should go to escape the storm. McDavitt requested that she call back in 30 minutes while he prepared a forecast. She called and he advised Nina to go south and heave to until the swells abated, according to their coordination center, but be prepared for strong winds and high seas. He received no reply. He then texted Evie daily for several days after, but heard nothing. On June 12th, Evie's partner made contact with Australian SAR, voicing concerns that the Nina had not arrived at its destination. However, no action was taken until 13th of June, when RCCNZ commenced a communications search. This was followed by a physical search on the 25th of June that strangely commenced nowhere near Nina's last communicated position. Instead, they took the position from an Iridium satellite phone, a device that has questionable position reporting capability, although they did discover an undelivered text message from Nina at 11:50 a.m. on June 4th, the day Evie texted McDavitt. It read, "Thanks, storm sails shredded last night, now bare poles, going 4 KT, 310 degrees, will update course info at 6 p.m. The undelivered text message clearly indicates that Nina was affected by the storm, but oddly gives no indication of immediate distress. The rescuers suspended their search on July 6th after overflying 737,000 square nautical miles of ocean, one of the largest searches ever for the agency, along with searches of the shoreline in the hope of finding survivors or debris. However, they found no sign of the vessel or crew. In the nearly 7 years since, nothing has been found, no debris has washed up, and all the searches have come up with nothing. It seems obvious that Nina was caught up in a vicious storm, but it seems strange that despite all the equipment they had on board, no distress signals were sent out. Nina probably sunk in a catastrophic event during one of the storms that had swept through the Tasman, although everyone remained hopeful that the crew had been able to abandon ship on a raft, although it seems sadly that was not possible. What is worth noting is that the location of the disappearance was within the area known as the Bass Strait Triangle, a stretch of water that has claimed several other ships and aircraft, and is perhaps best known for the disappearance of Australian pilot Frederick Valentich, who vanished after a UFO sighting in the area. The Indiana Dunes Mystery. On a hot summer day on Saturday, July 2nd, 1966, Ann Miller, aged 21, got into a car and went to pick up two friends, Patricia Blau and Renee Bruhl, both 19, from their Chicago homes. The three had become close as they all kept horses at the local stable. After collecting her friends, Ann began the hour's drive to visit the Indiana Dunes State Park. After a brief stop along the way to buy sun cream, the trio arrived at the beach at around 10 a.m. The beach was packed that day, with almost 9,000 visitors. Amongst them was a young couple named Mike and Frances, who set themselves down next to the three girls. At around midday, the young couple watched as the three women went for a swim, leaving their possessions on the beach. Shortly after, Mike and Frances saw the three women board a boat. As the hours passed and the sun started to set, Mike and Frances began packing up to leave, when they realised that the three young women had not returned, and all their belongings were still on the beach. Amongst the items were a purse, cigarettes, car keys, money and clothes. The couple decided to hand in the items to a nearby park ranger, informing him they had last seen the women boarding a boat. When the three women did not return home that evening, they were reported missing. But it would be 2 days before the rangers realised the belongings that were handed in by Mike and Frances belonged to the missing women, and that Ann Miller's car was still in the beach parking lot. A full-scale search of the area was ordered, however the delay in linking their possessions hindered the investigation, as in the interim period, thousands of visitors had been on the beach, meaning locating any clues would be near impossible. They did establish, however, that Ann's car hadn't moved since the women arrived on the Saturday. On July 6th, debris was discovered on Lake Michigan's shoreline, but after the Coast Guard inspected reports, they found no one had reported a missing boat, and when divers went down near the spot, they were unable to detect anything at the foot of the lake. Despite widespread appeals for information on the whereabouts of the three women, no one came forward. The most significant lead investigators had came from an Indiana man who had been filming on the beach the day of the disappearance. After they inspected the footage he had taken that day, two boats became of special interest. The first was the same boat mentioned by the young couple from the beach, described as a 16 or 18-foot trimaran made of fiberglass, and with a distinctive three-hull design. The second was a 26 to 28-foot cabin cruiser that witnesses, including a lifeguard, claimed that they had seen three women climb aboard along with three men. However, despite their best efforts, law enforcement investigators came up with nothing. Over the years, there have been many theories. The most obvious is that the women were involved in an accident on the boat they boarded. Although if that was the case, the man on the boat would have also been reported missing, but no such report was ever logged. Unless of course an accident did occur in which the boat owner survived and he covered up the incident to avoid blame for the women's deaths. Another suggestion is that the three women drowned after getting into trouble while swimming, although this seems unlikely as no bodies have ever been washed up. Another theory is that the two of the women were pregnant by married men. At that time, abortion was still prohibited in Illinois, and this has led to the belief that at least one of the women died during an illegal abortion, and the other two women were then murdered to cover it up. Although again, there is little proof this could have happened. After all, why would a woman go to have an abortion in a swimsuit, not taking any of her clothes with her, and meet her abortionist on a beach? During the investigation, it was learned that all three women had personal problems. This led to the speculation that Ann Miller, Patricia, and Renee had planned their disappearance from the beach that day. Apparently Patricia had even told a friend that she was going to leave and that no one would find her. But the fact that all their personal possessions, including money, was left behind seems an unlikely thing to do if you plan to start a new life. Then there is the connection to the stables. Anne, Patricia, and Renee often rode at the Tricolor stables in Illinois, which were owned by George Jane and his brother, who were involved in fraudulent activities, murders, and worse in the mid-1960s. In June 1965, Cheryl Ann Rood, a young woman, was killed at the Tricolor stables by a car bomb that had been meant for George Jane. George had asked Cheryl to move his Cadillac from the stable entrance and the bomb exploded. Some believe that perhaps Patricia, Anne, and Renee may have witnessed the bomb being planted, and as a result a hit was taken out on them. There was definitely a connection between the Janes and the missing women, as both men's telephone numbers were found in their belongings after their disappearance, and there is no question that the two men were criminals. George was shot to death in 1970, and his brother Silas was later convicted of conspiracy to murder his brother. He is also a suspect in the disappearance and probable murder of Candy heiress Helen Brack. However, neither brother has been positively linked to the women's disappearance. Even though Silas reportedly told a sheriff that he had 3 bodies buried beneath his residence, the sheriff took the claim seriously and planned to search the property, but before he could start the search, he was killed in a farming accident, and for whatever reason, it was not pursued after that. The sad fact is that the 3 women have now been missing for over 50 years, and no one is any closer to finding them now than the day they disappeared. The case is not unsolvable, but without any bodies or any solid new leads, it's unlikely that the truth will ever be known. Did they plan their own disappearance? Were they involved in a tragic accident? Or has something far more sinister happened to them? You decide.